in talking about no self in these past couple of weeks, the word the unmanifested has come up a number of times. It's used by people from all different traditions. And I'd like to explore that a little bit more today. The unmanifested being the source from which everything comes, the emptiness. Brahman, you could call it the Father in Christian tradition, although some Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart and Bernadette Roberts, would posit a Godhead, emphasizing the oneness of God, not just the threeness of God in the Christian tradition, so that you could call the Father the unmanifested, but you could also speak about the oneness beyond. As soon as you have the Father, you have the Son, the Spirit, so that's already manifesting, in the Son, which is a bold way of looking at it, but fairly interesting. So I thought we'd look a little bit more at the unmanifested, and then I noticed that there's a whole section, and I recommended this to someone recently. That's another reason it came to mind. There's a whole section in Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now called The Portals to the Unmanifest. So that's what we're talking about, but it also is very practical because it says these are the portals, these are entryways into the unmanifest, which is where we do want to wind up, whether we call it returning to the Father or rediscovering our true self. It's a wonderful way, and as I recommended before, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, I've said before, I consider to be the foremost in terms of accessibility and depth, intercultural spiritual writer of at least the last 20 years. And this is his major book, his first and major book. So we'll look a little bit at this chapter on the portals into the unmanifested, as it's called. So the first portal he speaks about is going deeply into the body. Now, I've brought this up before. Books like Reginald Ray's, the Tibetan Buddhist book on touching enlightenment, emphasize there's no enlightenment apart from the body. Despite so many traditions going overboard, whether it's Hindu or Christian, asceticism has often gone off the charts, and I wasted a lot of time doing that in my life. So did the Buddha, right? I mean, he spent 6 years, in this asceticism, and finally realized, wait a minute, this is not getting me anywhere. So it strikes me that there are several errors, in trying to get away from the body in order to be spiritual. First of all, you're denying reality, and no resistance to reality is going to get you to reality. I mean, because that's part of who you are. So it's only by entering into its mystery and its depth that you'll discover reality, however it manifests back to the unmanifest. The other thing is, it tends to be an effort of the will, and the ego is so invested, in getting rid of this lower self, and meanwhile, so it becomes a big ego trip, and that doesn't get you anywhere. So for those two reasons, at least, it's a dead end. But he speaks about, go into the energy inside your body. Try to get what he calls the inner body, and that's very true. There's an inner energy, an inner body, call it the energy bodies in some traditions. That this really is the body on a deeper level. And you can even speak about some traditions, you speak about an inner breath as well as an outer breath. So when you follow your breath, you come eventually to an inner breath, an inner breathing, kind of a pulsation, kind of like an inner pulse as well as an outer. Well, the blood pulsing. There's also an inner pulsation that's tied to that inner body. These are phenomena you can experience as you go deeper into meditation. But he says, get rid of external distractions, just telephones and interruptions, keep the spine erect. So he goes into the regular posture for meditation. Make sure the body's relaxed, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. So again, this is the wisdom that we follow in Zen of following the breath, and in other traditions too, because that gets you not just into the body, but into reality, your connection to your own life. The inner energy field Become aware of the entire inner energy field. Feel it. Don't just think about it. Take your intention more deeply into that. Merge with the energy field. So there's no longer a duality between the observer and the observed, but you become that energy. It's like, when you're doing kinhin, right? You become that sensation, So intriguingly enough, by going deeply into the body, you transcend the body because you get to an inner energy which goes deeper. He says this is really access to the formless realm. This is where you're going. Is truly liberating, frees you from bondage to form and identification with forms. Right? Remember, we have emptiness and form, and we have to have both. You can't just be identified with form. That's where most people are and where most people's misery is. So we can call life in its undifferentiated state prior to its fragmentation into multiplicity, and that's what we call the unmanifested, he suggests. The invisible source of all things. The being, capital B, within all beings. It's a good way of looking at it. It's a realm of deep stillness and peace, but also of joy and intense aliveness. So that's what you do discover, and hope you have discovered. And you become transparent whenever you are present to the light, the pure consciousness that emanates from this source. And the light is not separate from you, but constitutes your very essence. I think we'll talk about the light maybe in a week or a couple of weeks. Then it's the source of chi. Right? There's a whole subtitle here, chapter. Someone asked the question, is the unmanifested what in the East is called chi, a kind of universal life energy? Yeah. No. It's the source of chi. The unmanifested is the source. So it's already the manifestation. It's coming directly from the unmanifested. Call it chi, call it prana, call it grace. It's that life force which is coming from the manifest. So it's the bridge, chi, or that is bridge between the outer you and the source. It lies halfway between the manifested, the world of form, and the unmanifested. It can be likened to a river or an energy stream. Bernadette Roberts, as many others, speak of this great flow. Call it a Trinitarian flow, call it life flow, which is the manifest, coming from the unmanifest and returning to the unmanifest. So you are tracing the course of this river back to its source. As you go deeper into the inner body. Chi is movement, the unmanifested is stillness. Stillness. When you reach a point of absolute stillness, which is nevertheless vibrant with life, as he said, you've gone beyond the inner body and beyond chi to the source itself, the unmanifested. This is the emptiness that we talk about in Zen. So chi is the link between the unmanifested and the physical universe. So you can reach the point where the world dissolves into the unmanifested, and the unmanifested takes on form as the energy stream, which becomes the world. This is the point of birth and death. It's being born and dying. When your consciousness is directed outward, mind and world arise. When it's directed inward, it realizes its own source and returns home to the unmanifested. This reminded me immediately of the 61st koan in the Blue Cliff record. It's called A Single Atom of Dust. And it goes like this. If you set up a single atom of dust, the nation flourishes. But if you not set up a single atom of dust, the nation perishes. What does that mean? Well, as soon as you have any manifestation, even just a single speck of dust, you have the whole world. The whole world is there. And everything is connected, and everything is manifest. And so as soon as there's a single speck of dust, you have the nations, you have everything, including human society. But if you don't, then everything vanishes. And you're back to the unmanifest. All it takes is a single speck of dust, and you've got everything, and take it away, and everything vanishes. Mind and world arise together. So that's why the second line of the koan is really good. One of the leaders of the monks says, so which of you patch-robed monks will join me in living and dying together? Because that's what happens. As soon as you become manifest, then you live. When you get back to the unmanifest, you die. But only to live more deeply. Which is what Jesus is trying to say, tell us all along, of course, in the Paschal mystery. But so that interplay of life and death, as he says here, birth and death, is fascinating, and it comes, it reaches all sorts of manifestations and unmanifestations of levels as we go forward. So he says, in general, try to keep, to enter into that in your daily life, into that deeper level. He says, try and keep your attention. Don't give 100% of your attention to the external world and to your mind. So that's what happens as you go forward in meditation. You get a certain distance, from the externals, from the form. You appreciate them. You can use them as portals, but you've already used them as portals, and you're deeper in. So you can appreciate both the unmanifest and the manifest at the same time. And that's basically Zen. When you get, look at the flower. Where you look at the flower and you're really present and you're one with it, and you're off into the emptiness. But it's right there in that flower. So you can appreciate the flower as that portal and as that manifestation of the unmanifest, and enjoy both. Emptiness is form and form is emptiness. In fact, he quotes that in a couple of pages later. He quotes that line from the Heart Sutra and says it's from the Heart Sutra. Again, he uses all these traditions. He suggests that dreamless sleep is a portal. He says you go into the unmanifest every time you lose consciousness, and you go to sleep every night. So how come we're not transformed, by that experience? Well, he says because it's unconscious. That's not transformative, even though you go off, away from your usual consciousness. So that's not, the unmanifested does not liberate you unless you enter into it consciously. That's why Jesus, he suggests, didn't say the truth will make you free, but rather you will know the truth and the truth will make you free. It's got to be conscious. Interesting. He says, even lucid dreaming, he says, which can be interesting and fascinating, and some, for example, Tibetan Buddhists practice that. I've never been able to do that. He says it's interesting, but it's not liberating. Okay. So use your inner body as a portal. Other portals. Well, the now is the main portal, he says. And he keeps saying all along, if you're truly present here and now, time disappears, and it's just everything. It's the eternal. The now, the now of. That's even the Christian definition of eternity, when everything is simultaneously present in its fullness, right here and now. So time and the manifested are as inextricably linked as are the timeless now and the unmanifested. So time and manifested go together. Timeless now, capital N, and the unmanifested, capital U, go together. But he says here, as I just pointed out, indirectly you are aware of the unmanifested in and through the sensory realm. You can feel the God essence, if you want to call it that, in every creature, every flower, every stone. All that is holy because it's a portal. Everything is. Then he says, that's why Jesus, speaking from his essence of Christ, his Christ identity, says in the Gospel of Thomas, which of course, as you know, is not a canonical gospel, but is very eloquent, split a piece of wood and I am there. Lift up a stone and you will find me there. You'll find the Christ, you'll find the Buddha, you'll find yourself in everything. Another portal, he says, is the cessation of thinking. Good luck with that. But it is true. If all this thinking stops, then, wow. Continuous mind activity keeps you imprisoned in the world of form. It becomes an opaque screen that prevents you from becoming conscious. Well, as we know, unfortunately. Then, this is really important. Surrender is a great portal. Well, of course it is. Letting go of mental, emotional resistance to what is. That's an interesting definition of surrender. The letting go of mental, emotional resistance to what is. mental, emotional, and both. Resistance to what is. Interesting commentary. The reason for this is simple. Inner resistance cuts you off from other people, from yourself, from the world around you. It strengthens the feeling of separateness, right? You're being defensive, on which the ego depends for its survival, this feeling of separateness. The stronger the feeling of separateness, the more you are bound to the manifested, to the world of separate forms. And the more you're bound to the world of form, the harder and more impenetrable your form identity becomes. So it's on and on. It's an interesting commentary there. So you need to become transparent. Your form identity softens, he says. You kind of let go. Then someone asks, surely love must be one of these portals. No. As soon as one of the portals is open, love is present in you as the feeling realization of oneness. Love isn't a portal, it's what comes through the portal. Interesting. Kind of like the chi, as long as you are completely trapped in your form identity, there can be no love. That's interesting. If you're trapped in your form identity, you can't love. Your task is not to search for love, on Tinder or whatever, but to find a portal through which love can enter. Silence is a great portal, of course. If you know where to look, you'll find it everywhere. Do you hear that dog barking in the distance? Or that car passing by? Listen carefully. Can you feel the presence of the unmanifested in that? You can't? Look for it in the silence out of which the sounds come and into which they return. Pay more attention to the silence than the sound. Paying attention to outer silence creates inner silence. The mind becomes still, the portal opens up. Every sound is born out of silence, dies back into silence, and during its lifespan is surrounded by silence. The unmanifested is present in this world as silence. That's why it's been said that nothing in this world is so like God as silence. That's why music, for example, can be a portal. Art, great art, as Thomas Keating says, can be a portal, and service of others can be a portal, but only if you're really present. Only if you quiet down and appreciate, can really let it be present to it, and let it be present to you. Then art is a privileged portal. In the Zen Page-a-Day calendar last month, there was one that's rather striking that said, "Art is frozen Zen." Art is frozen Zen. Not in the sense that it's, lifeless but that it's distilled, it's condensed, it's concentrated. It's reality. Great art is concentrated reality, and provides hopefully a more easy access to a more privileged portal, but only if you don't get lost in merely aesthetic perceptions and ego-based, the whole thing, which happens with artists and audiences, unfortunately. And space, the vast space is also a portal. So silence, space, and space is also one. He points out that solid science does that nearly 100% empty space in matter. Apparently solid matter, is mostly space, which is the unmanifest. He has quite a long 4 or 5 pages on meditation on true nature of space and time. Space is like the unmanifested externalized, like the body of God, interesting. But it's all space and time are within you as the eternal now, and the vastness of no mind is like the inner space. Outer space, is awesome, but it's really just a mirror of the vast inner space, which is no mind, as he suggests. And time, is just really the now, the eternal now in us. That time is the externalization of all that. It's a fascinating reflection that he had. But the last part of the chapter, this is really important, and one of the best 2 pages in the whole book is conscious death, physical death. And we all got to get ready for that, right? There is one other involuntary portal apart from dreamless sleep. It opens up briefly at the time of physical death. Even if you've missed all the other opportunities for spiritual realization during your lifetime, one last portal will open up for you immediately after the body has died. He speaks about, the near-death experiences, radiant light, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which speaks about what happens, meeting the luminous splendor of the colorless light of emptiness, your own true self, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Unless you've already encountered this dimension of the unmanifested in your lifetime, you'll likely miss it, which is the point the book makes. Most people carry too much residual resistance, too much fear, too much attachment to sensory experience, too much identification with the manifested world, so they see the portal, turn away in fear, and lose consciousness. Most of what happens after that is involuntary and automatic. And so he's following the Tibetan Book of I Did, where you become, reincarnation begins after that. In Christian terms, it would be more like purgatory or going through who knows what purification still. So does that mean annihilation? No. Your radiant true nature remains, not your personality. That's interesting. Whatever is real or of true value in your personality is your true nature shining through. So don't be afraid. This is never lost. Nothing that is of value, nothing that is real is ever lost. But you'll find out what that is. What is real and what's of value. Approaching death is always a great opportunity for spiritual realization. This opportunity is tragically missed most of the time, since we live in a culture that is almost totally ignorant of death, as it is almost totally ignorant of anything that truly matters. And the last paragraph, this is really good. Every portal is a portal of death, right? Every portal that you go through, you die. You can't get through any portal without dying. This is the dying before you die, the mystical death, the great death, as Joshu calls it. That's that mystical death, the surrender, if you like, of what you're attached to or used to, your external self. So every portal is a portal of death, the death of the false self. So that's why, that famous phrase, die before you die so that you won't die when you die. If you're already used to dying every day, as St. Paul says, well, then you'll be ready for the big one, which isn't really the big one. The big one is the mystical death. So he says, when you go through it, the portal of death, you cease to derive your identity from your psychological mind-made form. You disidentify with the form to go into the unmanifest. You then realize that death is an illusion, right? Because your true self, the unmanifested, can't die. That's why Jesus says, I'm the resurrection and the life. You can't die. You can never die. You then realize that death is an illusion, just as your identification with form was an illusion. Moksha, the liberation from Maya, the illusion. The end of illusion, that's all death is. They should make a Hallmark card out of that. That's all death is, the end of illusion. It's painful only as long as you cling to illusion, which is what most people do. But otherwise, it's a liberation, off into the unmanifest, your true self. So, the gateless gate. Right? The portals are always there. There's no gate to go through the gate. But narrow the gate, and as Jesus says, most people don't find it, but it's right there. Where? everywhere.